and deselect this blob right here, and just add back in this hair. And then deselect this blob over here, so on and so forth. So then, let me grab this blob here too. And that one.
You're deselecting by doing the alt with the,
yes.
The quick selection.
That is correct. And then I'm going to add back in this here because I missed it. So, I mean, really, it's a dance of two tools. They do the same thing. Like I said, one is a broad brush for certain situations, and one is a very, very accurate brush. So now if I'm going to, let's just fill this, the opposite of this, with white again. I'm going to mash key commands so I don't have to bother you with menus. Now that looks, it still needs to be cleaned up a little bit, but it looks a lot better than it did before, right? That's easily cleaned up with a few tools, none of them easily applied. Hair is one of the worst things on the face of the planet to cut out, as you're all probably aware. It sucks. It's horrible. And especially if somebody has floofy or frizzy hair, you got to try to capture it as much as you can. I mean, how many of you have read the paper and seen someone who has hair that is, you know, it looks like a helmet because it wasn't properly cut out? That happens more often than not because it's hard. It's really hard to do. To get something like this, what I would do is I would go through with the Magic Wand tool. I'm just going to deselect this and start fresh. I would use the Magic Wand tool with like a tolerance of like 30, and then I would, why is this selecting everything? Oh, there we go. There we go. And then just hold down Shift and then grab all the parts of her head that I want. And accidentally mash back a couple times because I grabbed the wrong things. I'm going to show you, have I shown you guys Quick Mask yet? Remember how I told you about masking last time? That was like, it's a mildly advanced topic. Quick Mask isn't that fancy, but watch what happens. Remember, what I have selected is that part of her. If I turn on Quick Mask mode, it's this little button here, or the shortcut is Q on the keyboard. See what happened? Everything that's red is going to be dropped, and everything that I don't see is going to be kept. So now, instead of using the masking tool, I could use it, but what I could also do is use a paintbrush and then paint back those features. And after I paint back those features, I get a selection. Hence the Quick Mask. It's crazy, isn't it? It's something that for a long time, I was like, what is going on here?
So that's pretty easy. You could clean up the edges with that too, right?
Yep. That's basically the whole reason that you'd want to use it. Because you can see it's pretty labor intensive, because you have to paint the image. It's not ideal, but it does allow you to clean it up.
So, could you just talk what you were thinking again? Just say it. I'm sorry.
Well, Quick Mask allows you to clean up an otherwise really difficult selection.
Yeah.
I was trying to use the Magic Wand, but it wasn't working very well because the tolerance was too low.
Right.
I'm going to turn that off, and let's see here. I lost my own train of thought. The reason that I used the Quick Mask was to be a very quick, broad brush to help the very minute selections that my Magic Wand was giving me. Because you can see I've still got that stuff here, but now I've filled in the gaps easily.
And you selected her.
Yep.
Okay. And you mask it.
Basically. And it's the same thing as a layer mask. The reason why I kind of dropped you guys in the deep end with the layer masking is because that's about as far as Photoshop goes. and we're going to practice until we get there again. But we're going to go in depth on all the tools that we're using. So you've seen basically as bad as it gets. But that's not a bad thing, because it doesn't get much worse than that. Everything else is just how you use the tools that are available to you. Because like I said, there are a million ways to do this. I mean, heck, I could use the eraser tool to cut her out on a different layer if I wanted to. It would take forever, but I could. I could paint her with the mask tool, the quick mask tool. Or I could use the magic wand tool at a really high tolerance. Or I could use quick select in the draw of her head. Dozen ways to do the same thing. Or if I was really, masochistic, sadistic? I can't remember which one it is. Yes. Self-hating, right? I could go with the marquee tool and draw a bajillion little boxes around her head. But I would hate myself for it and would take forever. I could do all of that because there's a million ways to do it. Or I could even use the polygonal lasso tool, which I would draw a box around her head. And this is probably the quickest way you could do it, but it's not ideal.
Looks like a spider webs.
Magnetic lasso tool is similar to it. You'll watch as contrast, and you see how it sticks to it. It's not perfect, but it does an okay job. Yeah, and it's trying to detect contrast, and that contrast between the light and the dark of her hair and skin.
So could you zoom in and get the fine points?
You could.
It'd be real tedious, right?
It would be, and I would not, quite honestly, I would not trust Photoshop to know what it's doing. Never trust Photoshop to know what it's doing. Rarely does it know what it's doing. It's like yeah. So that right there was not too bad. But it could be a lot better. And like I said, sometimes if any of you ever are sweating it about little fuzzy hairs like that, don't. Like, really don't. It's not worth it to take the time to capture some hairs on somebody's head, when if you're going to cut and paste them onto a background, just blend it well, and you can hide the shortcut that you took there. For example,
Blend it well
I know it wouldn't typically be an all-black background, but for this one, the easiest just to do select color range and eyedropper the black.
you could. We haven't gotten to that
Then
yet.
you'd have to minus out her eyes. It's hard, but
Well, you could. This little tool here is similar. I mean, it's effectively the same thing as the magic wand tool, but it shows you a preview of what you're getting.
yeah.
So this right here with the tolerance of a scale of, I don't know, I think it's like a 255 to 0. Surprisingly enough, that's pretty similar to what, RGB values? Huh? Yeah. From 255 to 0 with the, hold on, let me deselect this. I'm pushing too many buttons. Ignore me for a second. There we go. If I go to select color range, I have an eyedropper that does the same thing. Fuzziness is tolerance, effectively. I can view the image. Doesn't really do me any good. But what I can do is just click, and then add with shift, subtract with minus, and what's black is going to be not selected, what's white is going to be selected. So if you want to increase it, you could. You could always go with one of the individual color ranges. If you've ever seen this, it's pretty weird. Pretty creepy, especially if you go with skin tones. If you didn't know this, every single person, no matter what their skin color is, their tones are in red and yellow. Because we're full of blood and we're skinny. Our skin is yellowish. Like, you can have the darkest person on the planet, their skin tone is probably going to be mostly red, but there's going to be a lot of black in there. You can have the lightest person on the planet, they're going to have a lot of yellow, with a lot of, with not very much black, with a lot of red in there too. So, very, very little. Like, if you care to know, a proper skin tone is the CMYK equivalent of, this is a little bit warm, and it's kind of a mid-tone. 1% cyan for a highlight, 15%, wow, I can't even talk today. For a skin tone highlight, the proper CMYK colors are 1% cyan, so very, very little blue, roughly 13 to 14% magenta in a ratio, and about 16 to 18% yellow. The equation that you want to rock is basically yellow minus magenta equals cyan, roughly, unless you're in a skin tone highlight. That's pretty far out there. But if you're doing any kind of like breakdowns for print specifically, you need to be aware of what you're going to be, what colors you're spitting out. Because printers render skin tones. If there's too much cyan in a skin tone and you have a lot of yellow, what's cyan plus yellow make as a color? Green. You're going to have green-looking people if you have too much cyan in there. Because the print does not glow. I mean, quite honestly, it's like the difference between this. I don't know. Can you guys see this? It's the difference between this and that. That's more like a print. This is nice and glowy and orange. You guys can see that back there? It's a very apt representation of what is and what isn't represented properly. So, color range would do it. Magic Wand would do it. Quick Select would do it. If you wanted to be painful, you could use Quick Mask, because you'd have to paint over the entire thing.
Oh, I thought that was an optimal solution.
For touching up big areas, yes. But starting from scratch, you want to choose the thing that's going to do the broadest brush, easiest. So in this situation, it's going to be like I don't know. Let's do a large brush with a quick mask tool. A little bit too big. Still too big. Go over her face. Still too big. Wow. Oh, that's why.
How are you making it smaller? Like, what's the shortcut?
The bracket keys. I could make the brush bigger and smaller here, but I'm lazy. I don't like to do that because it's an extra button I have to click. So the bracket key is right underneath the plus and the minus. If you're outside of this menu, we'll make it bigger or smaller. And if you want to adjust brush hardness, like a soft brush or a hard edge brush, you hold down Shift and use the brackets. And it makes it a harder edge or a softer edge. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of key commands that I've picked up over the time are just second nature to me. Yeah.
When you're in that quick mess and you're using the paint tool,
Mhm.
mine it's just painting it red, so it's cutting it out. How do you do it to where it paints it the opposite?
I have a foreground color as white and a background color as red. So I'm just going to use this as an example and go into my quick mask, which is this button down here. What's being dropped is red or black. Oops. I hate that. I always forget what I'm doing. So if I want to keep things, I want to use white. And I'm basically going to be painting white on top of that. So if I wanted to paint, if I didn't want this section that I just put in here, if I want to get rid of that, all I need to do is just flip my colors and then paint, and it gets rid of it. Or the shortcut key for that is X. So you can see I'm mashing X, and it's flipping between the foreground and the background color. So then I can get rid of it, I can add it. I can get rid of it, I can add it, so on and so forth. Pretty quickly like that. Like the Quick Mask tool is pretty, it takes getting used to. Because you can use the selection tools inside of the Quick Mask. Isn't that ridiculous? Why would you want that? Because I just made a selection out of the Quick Mask, inside of Quick Mask, and now I can go back in and I can apply it to this, which is weird and ridiculous. But you know what? Sometimes you might need to do that. There's a million ways to use Photoshop. All I'm trying to show you is basically what I want you to get out of this is which one to use when. If you want to use a broad brush when you can use a broad brush. That's what I'm saying. And then when you need to clean it up. Either with one of the Magic Wand tool, and then click and subtract, or the refine mask, or the modify tools, one of those. So selections are tricky, and they're deep. And if anything, I feel like I've confused you guys more by showing you all these options. But there's a lot you can do with it. Really, Photoshop is one glorified selection program. That's it. Because whatever you do with those selections, you can do whatever you want. easy, but you just got to figure out what's going to be the easiest one for you to use then.